the story you've been told about the stolen generation, the one taught now in schools, pushed in media, and repeated by politicians, is missing most of the truth. We've been told for years that white Australians raided and kidnapped Aboriginal children from loving homes in an act of pure evil and sheer cruelty. But the real story is far more complex and is not what the modern media wants you to hear. It's a story backed by official records, Aboriginal voices, and accounts you probably haven't heard from the mainstream narrative. Today we are going to uncover what they didn't tell you about the stolen generation, and you can decide for yourself if the stolen generation is what you've been told or something very different.
To support us, consider becoming a YouTube channel member or Patreon, or check out our merch, links in the description below.
In many Aboriginal communities, especially in remote areas, they faced catastrophic social conditions. And this wasn't just poverty. Police reports, missionary reports, and early government inquiries recorded horrific realities. Rampant child neglect due to starvation and disease, physical and sexual abuse and exploitation, often by older men in their tribal systems, infanticide, where they would either leave newborns out to starve or use more immediate methods like suffocation, strangling, or drowning, and yes, even recorded cases of cannibalism. These aren't comfortable truths, but they are recorded in Aboriginal testimonies, in testimonies from missionaries, and even recorded in the state. To ignore this context is to ignore why officials believed intervention was necessary. The driving policy behind what later became known as the stolen generation came from what was then considered a moral duty: to protect children from harm and to give them access to a better future. Government protectors, church missions, and charities saw children living in conditions they considered literally life-threatening, malnourished, exposed to physical and sexual violence, lacking shelter, and with no access to education. Contrary to the myth, most removals were not random raids. They were decisions, sometimes ordered by court order, and other times by Aboriginal parental request, often involving children who were already neglected or abandoned. It's also important to note that the large majority of the stolen generation were mixed race, half European, half Aboriginals, that were often treated much worse and at times completely rejected from their Aboriginal communities because at the time they were seen as not fully one of them. Many Aboriginal mothers, seeing no good future for their children in the camps, voluntarily handed them to church homes or foster families. And these specific mothers weren't tricked. They made heartbreaking but deliberate choices. Here's where the mainstream story breaks down, because there are countless voices of Aboriginal Australians themselves who say they are thankful that they were taken. Men and women who grew up in white foster homes or missions often recall receiving food and clothing for the first time, learning to read and write, being introduced to Christianity, which gave them hope and moral guidance, and escaping cycles of violence or abuse. Charles Perkins, who went on to become one of Australia's most prominent Aboriginal leaders, grew up at St. Francis House in Adelaide. He later recalled that he was glad to be taken there because, in his words, quote, "we were not doing too well in Alice Springs." He described the move south for schooling as, quote, "an offer my mother couldn't refuse, because she wanted her son to have the life, education, and opportunities she knew he'd never get if he'd stayed." And Lowitja O'Donoghue, another member of the stolen generation, stated she was, quote, "very happy living at Colebrook and received a sound education both there and at the Quorn Primary School," end quote. She even preferred the term removed over stolen when describing her circumstances. But you won't hear quotes like that on mainstream media or by our politicians, because they don't fit the victim narrative that's being weaponized for political gain, which we'll explain later. Let's be clear though, were mistakes made? Of course. Were some children hurt by the system? Yes. Some suffered feelings of neglect, identity loss, and more. But here's the difference. Those harms were failures of execution, not a failure of the central goal. The central goal was to rescue and uplift. With that in mind, it probably wasn't the best way to go about fixing the problem that these kids and communities were facing. There was probably a different and better solution that would have led to less pain overall. But the modern portrayal paints the entire policy as a racially motivated genocide, as if the only aim was to erase Aboriginal culture. And that for sure is a major distortion. The actual aim was to save Aboriginal children or half Aboriginal children from physical and sexual abuse and from a low quality of life, and to integrate them into the Australian way of life. Not because of hatred, but because of the belief that this would be beneficial and give them a better future and life. And drop a like if you're enjoying this video so far. The term stolen generation didn't even exist until the 1980s. Before then, removals were seen as a part of child welfare work, similar to how white children from abusive homes were also, and still to this day, are removed. The difference today is the framing. The narrative has shifted to serve a political agenda. Paint colonial Australians as universally evil, frame Aboriginal Australians only as victims, demand ongoing land concessions and endless apologies to take away our national pride, unity, and heritage that was built on and connected to our European Christian ancestry. This isn't about truth anymore. It's about rewriting history to fit an ideological agenda. These quotes and testimonies shared earlier, and ones like Gordon Briscoe, who later became a respected academic, who openly said he owed his education and career to being taken in, and was clear that without the removal, he believed he would have been trapped in poverty with no real chance to break free. These quotes don't erase or eliminate the pain that others felt, but they prove the story is not so one-sided. There is no honest history without these voices being heard. When we teach only one side, the pain but not the protection, the grief but not the gratitude, we are not teaching history, we are teaching propaganda. And propaganda fuels division and negative political power. It tells younger Australians that their nation's past was only evil, that they should be ashamed of their forebearers who founded and built this once great nation, rather than understanding the context and their intentions in doing these certain things. If we keep teaching lies of omission, we will destroy any hope of returning to national unity and pride in this country. Yes, let's acknowledge mistakes. Let's learn from them. But let's stop pretending that every white Australian in history was a villain, and every Aboriginal was a helpless victim. The truth is messier and deeper, and that's why it's worth telling. This is the story the media will never tell you. A story where the aim was to save lives, not destroy them, where many Aboriginal parents and children welcomed the chance for a better life, and where, yes, some suffered, but many thrived. If you believe Australians deserve to hear the full story, like and share this video. To support the channel, consider becoming a YouTube channel member at Patreon, or check out our merch, links in the description, and click one of the videos that are on screen now. And God bless Australia, and Christ is King.